Joshua's final act as leader was to assemble tens of thousands of Israelites at Shechem. He brought the tribal heads and the common citizens together to determine their future before his death. He recounts their deliverance and asks for their loyalty. The people respond with a passionate, unanimous pledge. They declare their intent to serve only Yahweh, citing his protection through Egypt and the wilderness as the reason they will never forsake him. But the text takes a sudden, dissonant turn. Joshua refuses the pledge. He looks at this highly motivated crowd and declares they are simply unable to follow through on their words. Modern recruitment strategies rely on lowering the barrier to entry to maximize participation. Joshua does the opposite. He is actively disqualifying willing volunteers who have just offered him total commitment. Joshua is exposing a hard truth about human psychology. An emotional yes, triggered by a charismatic leader or a high-pressure moment, lacks the stability required for a lifelong covenant. The primary threat to this assembly was syncretism, the ancient practice of layering new gods onto an existing pantheon. It allowed a nation to adopt a new deity, like Yahweh, without ever discarding the gods of their neighbors. Israel tried installing Yahweh as their primary operating system while keeping foreign gods running as hidden background applications, creating an internally conflicted system. Joshua identifies Yahweh's holy and jealous nature requires absolute compatibility. The covenant system will crash if it detects foreign allegiance. Humans default to this divided state because it provides a safety net. If one god fails to provide rain or protection, we have others in reserve. But this hedging prevents the total commitment Joshua is demanding. To build a true covenant, Joshua must force a crisis that terminates these background applications. He is forcing the death of their hidden dependencies. In his speech, Joshua identifies 3 distinct geographical layers where Israel has stored its secret gods. He maps their spiritual history across 3 different bodies of water. He begins with the Euphrates River. He reminds them that their ancestors, including Terah and the pre-call Abraham, worshipped other gods on the other side of that great river. By naming the Euphrates, Joshua is targeting the pull of ancestry. These are the gods of lineage, the generational habits and family expectations that we carry as our baseline identity. These cultural operating systems remain deeply embedded in the subconscious. Even though the people had crossed the river centuries ago, the gods of their fathers were still running in their private lives. The Euphrates represents the inertia of our origins. We find it difficult to identify these as idols because they feel like the natural fabric of our families. The second layer Joshua exposes is Egypt. This is a reference to the 400 years of bondage and the specific religious system that defined their era of slavery. Israel's time in Egypt was defined by intense generational trauma and systemic oppression. They didn't just witness the Egyptian pantheon, they were forced to serve within it. Psychologically, Egypt represents the survival mechanisms we forge during periods of intense trial. When a population is vulnerable for centuries, they create fail-safes to navigate their pain and guarantee their basic safety. These are dependencies formed under pressure. They are idolatries born of a desperate need to survive when the primary system seems to have abandoned you. Israel kept the Egyptian gods as a traumatic contingency plan. They held on to them because they were terrified that Yahweh's provision in the wilderness might eventually fail. Finally, Joshua points to the Jordan River and the land of the Amorites, the environment where they were currently standing. Unlike the gods of the distant past in the Euphrates or Egypt, the Amorite gods were the deities of the immediate present. They were the religious and social norms of their current neighbors. This maps to the drive for cultural conformity. It is the desire to blend in with the dominant modern culture and adopt its values to avoid social friction or isolation. When we try to maintain all 3, the gods of our ancestry, our trauma, and our current culture, we enter a state of decision paralysis. We attempt to keep all these tracks running parallel to our faith, hoping we never have to choose between them. Joshua's command to choose this day acts as a physical switch on the tracks. He forces the assembly to pick a single path, intentionally and violently terminating the parallel allegiances they've tried to maintain. The covenant requires the active, permanent discarding of the specific ancestral, traumatic, and cultural mechanisms that we have used to protect ourselves. Back at Shechem, the tension reaches its breaking point. Joshua has exposed their hidden safety nets and demanded the impossible. By insisting they are incapable of serving God, Joshua strips away their passive agreement. He forces them to look at the cost, confront their own weakness, and choose to commit anyway. The people respond by digging in their heels. They don't just repeat the pledge, they contradict his doubt. They shout, "No, but we will serve the Lord." Joshua finalizes the agreement by declaring, "You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord." He records their own words as the evidence that will hold them accountable. This commitment carries weight because it has been tested. By acknowledging the difficulty and doubling down, Israel has voluntarily removed their own future excuses for failure. Joshua understands that emotional conviction decays over time. The passion of the assembly at Shechem will eventually fade as the people return to their daily lives. He relies on physical architecture to anchor the psychological commitment. He needs a record that exists outside of human memory and emotion. To finalize the covenant, Joshua takes a massive stone and sets it upright under the oak by the sanctuary of the Lord. Joshua explains that the stone itself has heard the words of the covenant. It serves as an objective physical record of their decision, standing as a witness long after the generation that made the promise has passed away. This echoes his earlier command at the Jordan River, where 12 stones were taken from the dry riverbed and set up as a permanent memorial for future generations. These monuments create a timeline of historical data points that cannot be revised or argued away by subjective experience. Spiritual commitments require a physical architecture of remembrance to survive the inevitable pressure of the surrounding culture. The default human state remains a mix of conflicting allegiances, gods of where we came from, what we've suffered, and what our neighbors believe. Joshua's message challenges the modern reliance on easy verbal commitments. A momentary feeling of certainty is a fragile foundation for a life. This requires the construction of modern witness stones, rigid boundaries, disciplined habits, and structures of accountability that exist outside of your emotional state. A lasting covenant depends on the unyielding architecture you build to survive the day your initial emotion dies.